This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Summer's almost out and fall's calling. Luckily, Nordstrom has everything you need for the season ahead, all under $100. Discover new arrivals from your favorite brands like Mango, Princess Polly, Wave, Free People, BDG, and more. Whether you're planning a last-minute getaway, heading back to class, or refreshing your office looks, you'll find the latest trends and beauty must-haves without breaking your budget. It's easy, too, with free shipping, free returns, and in-store order pickup. Shop today, in stores, and at Nordstrom.com.
Our mission, as we describe it on the site, is that we investigate the way we live to help Torontonians survive and thrive in a rapidly changing city. A lot of news outlets encourage passive consumption, and they want, if they encourage any sort of engagement, it's with their own site. Like, they want you to consume the information. But for us, our ethos is like, you take the information from our site and then you engage with the world around you. We've seen the impacts of like just people going in and on themselves like more and more in this like digital realm, and it's not healthy for societies. And so that's something I'm really passionate about.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century.
Okay, today on the podcast, I am joined by Anita Li. Anita has a long history in journalism and is currently the publisher and CEO of The Green Line, which is an award-winning hyperlocal publication in Toronto, up in Canada. I believe you're the first Canadian I've had on the show, actually, Anita. So anyway, yeah, thanks for joining me on the show and taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, great. I did a very brief intro there, and kind of like I do on every episode. I'm just wondering if you could maybe expand on that a bit and just give us a brief bio of your career and kind of what led to The Green Line in broad strokes, and we can dive in deeper on other parts as we go. But yeah,
I'll try to keep it brief, but it is actually pretty long. I'll try to be succinct. Okay, so got into journalism at age 14. Worked at all the major establishment or legacy publications in Canada. So for your American audiences, that would be like the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is kind of like NPR. The newspaper record in our country is the Globe and Mail, and the Toronto Star is our largest paper. So places like that. I ended up moving to New York City in 2015 and was a news director at a publication called Complex Media. I also worked at Fusion. So they were more youth-led digital media American like outlets. And then I moved back home after the first Trump administration arrived and ended up working at a communities-driven startup as director of communities called The Discourse, which was a really disruptive publication at the time based out in Vancouver. And that kind of led me down this path of doing consulting, education work, and eventually launching The Green Line in April 2022. So that's kind of like the very short SparksNotes version of my career.
That's great. Yeah, perfect. Kind of paints a picture. Can you tell us a little more about The Green Line as it exists now? What communities do you serve? What formats do you offer? What's your team look like?
Okay, so those are a lot of questions. I'm going to try to summarize. Just
take one at a time. Sorry if that was too much.
No worries. So we launched in April 2022. Currently, we have roughly a dozen staff, 3 of whom are full-time or going to be full-time because I'm actually in the process of hiring my 3rd full-time staffer. And then the remainder of whom are part-time or like interns, essentially, or fellows is what we called them. And then we are a digital news outlet. So we have a website, thegreenline.to. In addition to that, we've actually historically produced stuff tailored to social media, especially Instagram. But there's a long kind of side story about how there was a federal bill called C-18 that's meant to regulate tech giants in response to the fact that they were like taking up advertising dollars from Canadian publishers. So in response, Meta actually like blocked Canadian publishers from their accounts. So we don't actually tailor our stuff to social, but we still have a presence on social, especially TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And we also produce 2 newsletters. And we also do a lot of like in-person engagement. So like even though we're digital first, we're also extremely analog. And I'm trying to think of anything else. What else you asked? Does that really cover it?
Yeah. I just wanted to get an idea. What about so it says you refer to the organization as a hyper-local outlet. Like, are there specific geographies you're covering? Is it the whole city of Toronto? Is it neighborhood by
So
neighborhood? How's that work? Yeah.
So broadly, because we're a small team, right? So there's no way I'm going to be covering, like having the scope of coverage that, say, the Toronto Star does. But we broadly cover underserved communities. And what that really means is our places that are not well served by existing media. And those can be considered like what in the industry it's called news deserts or news donuts. So news deserts are like places where, like, say there's like a rural area that just has like no local paper. And then news donuts are actually places that don't have a lot of good coverage within a saturated media market. So for example, my hometown is Scarborough, which is a suburb of Toronto of like 700,000 people. It historically has not gotten really nuanced or proper or appropriate coverage, but it's like there's tons of publications in Toronto. So that's what a news donut is. So we basically go across the city because there's like over 150 neighborhoods in Toronto, and there isn't a specific geography that we've focused on. It's really just like if there's a really interesting story, especially one that's community driven that we're told about, then we go there. But what I would say is like there's two things I want to mention in answer to audience and coverage focus. So we focus on something that we describe as 5 pillars of livability. So we're a nonpartisan outlet. We try to look at things that can be less polarized or at least politicized. So things like jobs, housing, food, health, and commuting. And then in terms of our audiences, right now we serve like it's 74% of our audience is 18 to 44-year-olds. So that's Gen Z and millennials. And our core audience is actually younger Torontonians that are not news obsessed. They're like trying to figure out their lives in the city. They're trying to establish their career, make friends, build community. And so we really try to serve those folks. And the secondary audiences are folks who are more marginalized. So folks who might like be a lower income and they're like, I need to figure out how to like navigate this eviction, or I have food insecurity issues. So like, where's the closest like reasonable, affordable grocery store? So that's what I would say. And then the third audience are folks who are more established. They're like change makers. Maybe they're homeowners. They're people who are well established in their career and their personal lives. And so they have the time and energy to like give back.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a few things. First of all, I'm very aware of news deserts. I have never heard news donuts before, but that makes a lot of sense, even as you described it. Because you think news desert and you think, more rural, like towns or whatever. But news donut, sure, there's a lot of great coverage, but not in this specific area. That's interesting.
Totally.
I also wanted to touch on how you said that you serve younger Gen Z millennial audiences and kind of got started on social. And that really shines through on your website. I wanted to just compliment you on your website. I love the look of it, the feel of it. It's very kind of sleek and modern, and it has a bit of like almost like an Instagram feel, and also really communicates what you were saying. People trying to figure out how to get a hold of their life. Up and coming, I've seen just scrolling through here over the past few days. I've noticed that, so it really stands out. And I'll link to that in the show notes for anybody that wants to check it out. So along with that, I think I read on your About page that the Green Line, you said you launched in 2022. I think I may have read somewhere, maybe wrote down wrong, that you soft launched on social in 2021.
That's accurate. That's right. Yeah.
And also, so that's tough with that bill. I forgot what the bill was with the Meta's just cutting everybody off. I have a newsletter and I remember when that came out and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And the kind of some similars happening. Well, not similar, but California and Google had a deal recently, and everybody's backing out on that now also.
Totally.
Not exactly the same thing, but yeah.
New York as well. Like I know there's stuff going on in California.
Yeah.
And New York. So they're actually looking to Canada as like a model for what not to do, actually. So yeah.
Anyway, shame on Zuckerberg. So you said you're not, tailoring it too much for the Meta platforms anymore, but I am curious what platforms you did start with. And one thing, talking to a lot of publishers, is trying to navigate the social media landscape. So any just broad lessons or tips on utilizing social, since that's kind of where you got your start? Anything that comes to mind there? Yeah,
for sure. So like I'm of the mind, like I try not to be dogmatic about this, so I have a more nuanced view. But initially I was like, okay, we can't hand over, like clearly based on the way tech giants behave and how like random the algorithms can be, you can't really like like your traffic needs to be owned, right? Like your audience needs to be owned. It can't be owned by like a third party platform, right? And we've seen this with Meta, like in Canada, but also like TikTok. There was like talk in the US Senate of like banning TikTok, and it was like there's a lot of flip flopping there. So can you imagine what would happen if you built your entire audience on those platforms and it disappears overnight?
Yeah.
Well, I'm very like pragmatic in the sense that I'm like, I I understand my audience communicates on these platforms, especially IG and TikTok, so I can't ignore them, obviously. But I definitely need to start building out my own like my own audience. So that's why we have newsletters. It's why we do community events. It's why we're developing an app. Like all of this is like in a closed ecosystem, basically, right? I would say like to start, we actually tailored specifically our content to Instagram. So like we developed this like approach, which is pretty common these days in 2025. But in October 2021, when we soft launched, what I wanted it to feel like was kind of like flipping through a newspaper, but digital. So there was like a headline, a deck, a byline, like an image, which was really like a GIF, and then you could swipe through. So there'd be like bullet point summaries, like a lot of graphics. So it emulated the experience that a lot of us had growing up as kids, like even Gen Z's, definitely as a millennial, that was my experience. And so it felt familiar, but still modern. And people loved it. Like when we first launched, like it really sucked because like it's not like our traffic declined. It's because we were still growing. So it's like, it really cut us off at the pass, really is what I would say. So at the time we were growing, I think this was summer of 2023. We would launch in April 2022. So it was like just a year and a half, a little over a year later, suddenly like it just plateaued or actually did decline because just around the time that we were actually starting to pick up steam on IG, which was like not great. But the key was like really, to me, it's like a combination of nostalgia. A lot of like what I produce and the advice I would give is it's kind of like tapping into nostalgia. Like I mentioned, like newspapers or like there's like a resurgence of young people liking zines and like physical things, but it also still meets them where they are because they grew up on these platforms. And yeah, and just one big thing that I do. So I'm 38, and my team is made up of like 22. They range in age from like 22 to like 34. So they really encapsulate the core demographic that I'm trying to go after. So they really are good kind of sounding board for me, and they really inherently understand how to communicate online for both generations. So that's what I would say. Just like hire the people that you're trying to serve.
That's great advice, like directly to me, actually. I feel that hits a little close to home. I just turned 40, which was a rough one to swallow. So roughly the same age as you. And I think I'm pretty, tech savvy and can communicate well on the internet. Then yeah, I'll talk to like a 23-year-old kid and they're just like light years ahead of me or just view the world differently. So that's good advice. And it's funny how you say just owning your audience. That has come up over and over again on this show. And I've had people on who are trying to launch social media apps or doing like social media first local publications. And every time I ask, like, how do you get them off of the platform to yours? And it's a difficult question to answer. Turns out there are really smart people trying to make sure you don't do that. Instagram, that's the answer I've kind of come away from talking to a bunch of people about it. But you still can. You still can. It's still possible. So you brought something up I wasn't aware of. You talked about that you were thinking of developing an app. What would that look like? So
there's this really cool German company called T-Chop. They're actually a B2B app company, but the guy behind it, Heiko, he's a fan of the Green Line since the beginning, and he's been trying to work with me since launch. I just didn't have the capacity or the resourcing to focus on that. And then he reconnected with me literally like several months ago when I have more capacity now and a bigger team. And he wants to build out this app for free for me, actually. So his personal passion, basically the way he earns his revenues through like creating apps for other businesses, right? But his passion is actually supporting local news. So it's a really cool, like closed ecosystem where I know like every news outlet has an app, but this functions differently because the way the Green Line works is like we're a community-driven news outlet, right? And so I feel like it's really experiential. So I mentioned that events are a huge part of what we do. And so a lot of the energy that we have at our events, these like right now does not translate to the digital realm. And that's actually something I want to sustain, and an app can do that. So the cool thing about this app is like you can grab like YouTube videos from our YouTube channel, like a TikTok from our TikTok account. You can grab a newsletter, you can grab like a story, like a long form story. You can grab like whatever you want from like our broader ecosystem and put it in this closed one that we can actually control. And not only that, there's also like It has like kind of a WhatsApp-y kind of integration where you can DM users, you can broadcast in group chats. So every month we have this thing called an action journey where we tackle one systemic issue facing the city in Toronto, like connected to the 5 pillars I mentioned earlier. So what's cool is like we can take in last year we did something, or last month, actually this month, May 2025, we did an issue on third spaces. And the energy from that event was great. There was like 50 people that attended. It'd be awesome to have like a group chat focus on third spaces or young Torontonians looking for those kind of spaces outside of their home and workplace and continue that energy. You can also integrate like, membership payments or event tickets, because events are like not free, they're monetized. So there's just like everything's just like in a one-stop shop. And on top of that, you have, notifications are like the lifeblood of an app. Like every company is trying to get into your phone. So they like every time you swipe down on your phone, you see a ton of like alerts or notifications like, hey, check this out. So that's something that's also really beneficial for us. And so like Heiko and his team at T-Chop are working on that right now.
That's awesome. I have to check them out. Is it T-Shop or T-Chop?
T-Chop, like chopping like vegetables.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. I'll try and find that, and I'll link to that also in the show notes to anybody listening. That's a cool idea. So you talked a bit about this, and when I was going through your site, one thing that stood out to me is your city guides and the associated tools kind of provided with them. What inspired those, and what's the kind of reception been like for that? Because it seems like a really cool, useful thing.
Thank you. So I realized that I should say our mission. Our mission, as we describe it on the site, is that we investigate the way we live to help Torontonians survive and thrive in a rapidly changing city. So the whole ethos behind the Green Line is like a lot of news outlets encourage passive consumption, and they want if they encourage any sort of engagement, it's with their own site. Like they want you to consume the information. But for us, our ethos is like you take the information from our site and then you engage with the world around you, whether that's like your neighborhood, your like state, your country, or what have you. And that's really important for us from a democratic perspective, but also just like a civic life perspective, because we've seen the impacts of like just people going in and on themselves like more and more in this like digital realm, and it's not healthy for societies. And so that's something I'm really passionate about. So we wanted to produce service-oriented journalism, like tools and guides that were evergreen for people to be like, okay, like I'm trying to figure my stuff out. There's a guide that we have to co-housing, and there's like a lot of young people who can't afford a house. And I live in Toronto, which is like the biggest city in Canada. It's very expensive. And a lot of young people just can't afford to like have a mortgage, or, they just are renting forever. And so they're starting to do stuff like co-housing, like living or buying property with like their friends and stuff. So that is like something that's very practical that has always been extremely popular, that particular guide, because it's just relevant to the lives of like young people. And it's easy to go to like the Green Line and check out a guide than like do tons of research on Google where you have to comb through PDFs or a bunch of random sites. So we're just trying to produce things that are evergreen, service oriented, that you can use for the long haul.
And how have you built those out? Sorry, I was just pulling one up. Like I was looking at this one where I lost it. Like the Third Spaces map. Do you have like a developer on staff like building this stuff? Because I wouldn't know where to start. If I can kind of put my website together, but just
Yeah, we do. So my team is like young, but they're really talented. Like I also teach at the journalism innovator in residence at Toronto Metropolitan University, which is one of the best journalism schools in the country. And so I get a pick of a lot of some of the most talented young journalists that have really helped me build my company. Our developer Hans, shout out Hans, he actually was like a friend of a master's student that who I hired, a master of journalism student that I hired. And so he's been on board ever since. Like it's been a while actually, just helping us develop out some of these things. So we're very lucky to have him.
Local news needs new revenue streams, and my company, localpod.co, makes it easy and affordable. Our entry-level offering transforms your written content into high-quality audio and monetizes it with programmatic ads, all with zero extra work on your end. Think of it as a plug-and-play podcast solution for publishers. And if and when you're ready, we'll help you stair-step your podcast feed up to even more content, whether that's in-depth investigative reporting, interviews with community leaders, or whatever ideas you may have. You keep reporting, we help you turn it into new revenue. So you can get started at localpod.co, link in the show notes, or click the link in the show notes to set up a call with us today and learn more. Okay, back to the episode.
Yeah, it looks great. And the site looks great too. That was kind of my next question, which we kind of already talked about before, was
Yeah.
just because I was instantly struck by the site, how nice it looks. It's so sleek, modern. It's a different feel than a lot of news sites, like the whatever it is based on blocks, CMS or anything like that. Can you talk about the thought that went into it and kind of feedback you've gotten from just the actual site?
Totally. I'm glad you pointed that out because it's extremely deliberate. Like I'm sure you can tell from the way we approach our visuals that we thought about it from the before we launched. And I knew that because our audience, like they grew up having a high expectation for visuals because all the platforms that they engage in, especially IG, are quite visual. So I worked with a company that at the time was called Rally Rally, now called Brightweb. So Brightweb acquired Rally Rally. They were a company in like they're based in Canada, and they're basically it's like user experience design, and they at the time Rally Rally really prioritized like community driven design principles. So what that really means is like they really pay attention to their audience when actually developing out the user experience and user interface of a website. So I knew from the beginning. So the action journey model I was telling you about earlier, there's like a 4-step process. I'll explain it first, and then it'll make sense as to why I'm explaining it because it's a huge part of the site. But basically, in a given month, we tackle one systemic issue. In a given month, we tackle one systemic issue facing the city. So in week 1, we publish an explainer that unpacks the problem. Week 2, we publish a feature that reports on solutions to the problem. Week 3, we have like an event where we like gather all sorts of stakeholders, including experts, community members, like community organizations, to talk about solutions to the problem, and we survey them. And then in week 4, we crowdsource those solutions, that data, and we identify the top 3 community-driven solutions. We reflect those back to members of the public along with links to resources so they can take action on their own terms. So that's like our core model. And you can see from the website, if you go to thegreenline.to, that it's built into the user experience. So if you click under issues and you click under any one of the issues, you'll see part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And the other element of this is like we really wanted to feel clean. So I mentioned to you that a lot of our audience, like younger people, felt overwhelmed by information, and not just information, news that's really anxiety inducing or depressing. So if you go to any site, like as you said, it's very blocky. There's a lot of headlines screaming at you. And oftentimes, especially for like for-profit sites, there's a ton of advertising everywhere. So it's like just like a bunch of stuff screaming at you. And I wanted it to feel calm, which is why like I chose the color green as well. I mean, Green Line is named after like a subway line in the city. So it's kind of a if you know thing if you're a local. But it also had the other function of feeling like very chill. And I wanted it to feel really clean and open.
The green, I'm not even a color-based person like my wife is. She's always pointing stuff out to me. It's way over my head. But the green is very calming. And the functionality is great. Sorry, going on a tangent. When you talked about, I love the way you set up how you have the different issues and the kind of very logical stepping stone approach, kind of like solutions journalism way of going about it. How do you pick those out? So is it, because you only get so many a year if you're operating that way.
Yeah.
Is it just, are you making those decisions? Or taking feedback from the community? Sorry, I'll stop talking.
Like it's community driven. So it's always like audience driven. Obviously we still have like editorial judgment, like my team and myself. But what I would say is like, I can't definitively say it because we're constantly iterating on this approach. Like it's still the core 4-step thing. But for example, in the first like 2 years, it was me kind of like freelancers approaching me. And I was like, oh, that'd make a good action journey. And I would just do it. But starting as of like last year to this year in particular, it's very community informed. So remember I told you that at the event we do community surveys, and we also host like facilitated story circles is what they're called, which are facilitated conversations with an eye towards like solving a problem. So we would take all that information and analyze the data in a spreadsheet and then be like, okay, this is like the top 3 things that people want us to talk about. So for example, in March 2024, I believe, we held an action journey about the housing crisis. People that attended that. And so and a bunch of people, probably like 60% of people, 50 to 60% of those people answered our surveys. So a lot of what they were asking about was like dealing with evictions. So for January 2024, January 2025, we ended up doing something, an action journey issue on how to deal with evictions in Toronto. So it was very much like listening to the community. And the other thing I mentioned was the 5 pillars. So originally for this year, we would tackle 5 issues across those 5 pillars in the first half of the year, and then 5 again in the second half. And then we'd have like a special issue and a break for the other 2 months out of the 12. That is like, we're still iterating on that. So it's not like a set in stone thing because we're only in year 3. So we're constantly like refining our approach.
That's great. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'm a fan. It's funny. I was really impressed by your site when I dove in, and it just gets me more excited as you're talking about it. Just the thought that goes into it. It's very impressive. I love it. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the business side of the Green Line. Are you a nonprofit? I'm not sure if it functions the same way in Canada.
No. So we're mission focused for profit is how I describe ourselves. We are an organization that is I know you guys have a 501c3. I don't really know the mechanics of the difference between nonprofits, but effectively the way I see it, nonprofit and for profit aren't different. And the reason why I say that, fundamentally not different when it comes to revenue generation, because nonprofits can't always continually rely on handouts. I know it's easier to be able to unlock foundation funding if you are a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you have to have a solid business model. And I also wanted to prove to myself and other people that you can create a profitable local or hyper local news outlet. So that's why I set out to do it for profit. So I have a pie chart in front of me, but I know your listeners can't see it. But essentially, we have quite diversified revenue streams, and the dominant one is something that I describe as partnership revenue. So what that is I would never survive, or the Green Line would not survive without our partners. And we have media partners, we have community grassroots partners, we have educational partners and cultural partners. And they have helped us unlock both direct and indirect sources of funding. I've never actually received more than $50K from one entity. So I'm not the kind of place that has gotten $2 million from one source or 2 sources. And that's kind of dangerous because I'm sure you've seen a lot of, especially American publications, fall by the wayside because they just were getting a lot of money and they were relying on it and they didn't develop a business model. Mm-hmm. And then they end up dying because then, with foundations, they can just turn on a dime. And what's going on with US aid and a bunch of other stuff in the US, there's just less funding for a lot of these nonprofit organizations. So I was aware of that in advance, which is why I kind of structured it like this. So I'll give you a quick example of indirect and direct sources of funding I get through partners. So I have a broadcast partner called City News Toronto. They're a legacy broadcaster, really well respected, been around for decades. We co-produce a community show with them that airs bi-weekly. We get full autonomy editorially. Our branding's everywhere. They pay us to produce a segment for the show, the lead segment. So that's an example of direct revenue that we get from a partnership. And then another one is for example, we partnered once with a community center. And that community center was able to unlock a grant that would normally only go to nonprofits. And we were able to get that money because we partnered with them, even though we're for profit. So that's an indirect kind of way where we can co-apply to grants with nonprofits and unlock foundation funding that we would normally never get. So that's a huge part of our revenue stream or our business model. And then it's foundation funding and then corporate sources of funding. And then there's smaller levels of membership and donations, which are B2C funding, which I'm starting to build out now because that requires a lot of infrastructure. And then there's other stuff like events and merch and all that, which is takes up it's much smaller revenue.
Yeah, I was curious because, like you said, I don't see traditional, what I'm used to seeing, advertising, Bob's car dealership on the side of in the sidebar of the website or anything like that. So, but that was 5 or 6 different sources. It sounded like I let something like that.
There's roughly, let me just double check that for you. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's a couple of smaller ones that I didn't mention,
right, just little
boards and other sorts of things. Oh yeah, no, actually government funding is a huge chunk. So I misspoke. It's actually partner revenue, number 1. Number 2 is corporate, and then there's government is actually 3. It's foundation funding actually takes up a smaller chunk.
That's interesting. I'm glad. I'm. It's good to hear that it's so diversified because I mean, you're speaking my language when you said the reason why you started it as a for-profit. Kind of the point of this podcast is to find how can we, fix this problem in here in the U.S. but also in Canada, where despite what some may say these days, we're still pretty close culturally and economically and everything. But I had somebody on the podcast a while back who also said they just talked about how dangerous it is to have like one or two sources of revenue coming in. So it sounds like a good, healthy organization. Have you thought, I don't know the state of the publication now. Have you thought of like, what's the 5-10 year plan for this? Do you want to grow this? Do you just want to make this as perfect as can be as a case study for other people out there? Like so I didn't have that in my questions. It just kind of came up in my brain just now, but.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I'm not trying to build an empire. Like that would be antithetical to like what my ethos is. And we've seen like the BuzzFeeds and the Vices of the world, even if they have massive traffic, they were in the red. And so like, that's like a huge cautionary tale for a lot of like publishers. And I also, by the way, my background is like, when I said that I worked at American digital media outlets, I meant venture-backed ones that were really like, it was like early 2010s, really sexy time for like venture capitalists to buy up like digital outlets. But then all of it fell apart as we've seen, right? So I'm careful not to be like, I'm going to build like the biggest, like, because I also don't believe I believe in local news. And I don't really believe like a massive like entity can cover like that is really removed from folks on the ground can really serve people locally properly, right? So for me, like, there's a lot of I'm really open. I'm like somebody who's like, let's just like, I have a strategy, but I also am very much like, let's see where this takes me. And I'm going to listen really carefully to what my business is telling me so I can follow my intuition around what makes the most sense. I mean, there's a couple other things. There's actually been like acquisition interest in the Green Line, although it's like very early day conversations. So like one of the big things is like, I definitely want to build out my consulting arm because there's so much interest in the action journey globally. Because I've spoken in Italy, I was in like Thailand talking about the model like across the US. And so there's definitely interest for newsrooms to kind of adapt the action journey model. I even created a guide with the University of Missouri's Reynolds Journalism Institute to create a guide to the action journey model, if anyone's interested. And then also, like, I do want to grow it. Like, for me, it's about getting it to sustainability. I would not say at this point where sustainability is like it's your own personal definition. Like, oftentimes people say it's like when you can sleep at night. And I can sleep well, except I'm like 8 months pregnant, and that's probably causing my sleep to be not as good. But I will say that like I want it to get to the point where I can pay everyone like very like healthy, livable wages where they can survive in the city of Toronto. I would love to have a much bigger like full-time staff and then continue to produce and honor our mission. So I don't really want to think about like acquisition stuff too much. I just really want to focus on like really nailing our value proposition and making sure the way we portray ourselves is what we're delivering on. And then I think like audience and will come and maybe down the line I'll have an exit, or maybe, maybe like it'll expand to different, like I'll take the model to other cities across Canada or the US. So I'm really open. I just like, it's so early days that I'm just kind of figuring out what my different pathways are.
Okay. Yeah, that was a big question also. Like, what's your grand plans for 10 years from now or whatever? Because I have no idea what mine are either. Excellent. All right. I could probably keep going, but in the interest of time, I know you're busy. I'm busy. We can cut this soon. I would love to, what else, where can people find you online? Anything you want to promote or link to that we haven't talked about already? I'd love maybe after the call, if you send me that guide that you talked about, I'd love to link to that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can send you I'll link to you the website, the guide. So I mentioned you guys the greenline.to. Then there's like the Reynolds Journalism Institute guide, which I'm going to send to Paul, and then he can share it with you guys. And then there's also like, I actually have a newsletter that predates the Green Line. So I launched this newsletter in September 2020. It's called The Other Wave. It's a journalism innovation newsletter where I kind of, it's my musings and thoughts on the industry. So I highly recommend subscribing to it. It's a Substack newsletter, so I can send that along as well. Yeah. And I mean, like, there's all the other stuff. Like, our social is at the Green Line TO, unless you're talking about TikTok, then it's at GreenlineTO. And we also have an Instagram account called TGL Helps. And then if you go navigate to just like our website, you'll see a drop down focused on newsletters, and you can subscribe to our 2 newsletters, Changemakers and Documenters. And I think that's like pretty much it. You can contact me also via email. My professional email is indicated on the site. So
perfect. Yeah. I'll link to all that stuff. Just if you're listening, just scroll down in the show notes. It should be right there. Yeah, go check out the website. It's beautiful. And follow Anita, follow all her stuff. All right, Anita, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate the time. And thanks for sharing all this with us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.